It says starting. Hey, there we are. I think we're working now. Hi, everybody. And hi, Michael Lynn. Welcome.
Howdy, howdy.
Is this your first time doing this with us?
No, I've been in the MacAdmin's monthly before. It's been a while, and got my coworker here, Edgar Sassidou.
Oh, sauce.
But I think this is the first time you're joining us like live in the Hangout as a guest and talking back to us. Maybe.
That's probably accurate. I think I usually just joined as like a chatter or something like that.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to dive right into to your piece of this because I want to be respectful of your time as much as possible. So thank you for making the time and joining us all the way from the West Coast. So one of the things we've been talking about in the MacAdmin community and largely spearheaded by you is moving to MDM management for Macs and what that gives us and what that doesn't give us, and will it be good or will it be horrible? And why don't you explain a little bit about that?
Do you want background as to why this discussion became a timely event?
Sure, I think that's useful.
Okay, so looking for the future as to how to manage Macs is always something that anybody involved in the business should definitely be researching. What's the best way to do things. But in this particular instance, this conversation really sort of exploded because separately, several organizations were contacted by various Apple representatives that they have business with, and they were, this started probably in the summer, but really picked up recently. They were basically heavily suggested that, hey, what is it that you're not doing with MDM on your Macs right now? If that was the only thing you had to manage your Mac with, what couldn't you do? And this, when you hear that from one source, you kind of just go, well, that's interesting. When you hear it from two, you go, huh. Well, when you hear it from half a dozen or more, globally disconnected, different companies, different contacts, you start wondering what's up. And so this opened up a larger conversation, basically like, well, why would they be telling us this? Why would they be asking this question? What should we be prepared for in the short term here? So a lot of us started thinking about what's on the horizon as far as Macs go, and went back and look at the WWDC materials, which are really great. Even if you don't have a developer's account, Apple has gotten extremely lenient about those materials. They actually changed their NDA agreement for people who have signed the developer's agreement that says that you are allowed to talk about what they talked about at WWDC. And their developer forum, you can log into it even without a developer ID. They don't have any wording about you posting materials out of there, but like if you're interested, you can really in-depth find out stuff about operating systems before they come out now with the materials that Apple provides.
And I think pretty nice is that all the videos are available.
Oh yeah,
for free. I mean, in perpetuity, not only very quickly after the conference has been going on, but all these videos are there. And now they stole the ASCII WDC stuff, right? And they have transcriptions and they're searchable. So it's really, it's an amazing resource no matter what.
And there's an iOS app that lets you see the WWDC videos from Apple that's official. And there's an unofficial one on GitHub for the Mac. But then there's the website too, and you can go searching there. Anyways, we started going back through the materials, and a lot of things started popping out in regards to the new file system format that Apple was releasing in the operating system, APFS. and some of the wording that they chose to use, and just made us start thinking, okay, so this plus that, why would that make them suggest, MDM only? And we even, to a certain extent, got hints that the reason that some of these suggestions were that launch daemons may be changing in their functionality, if not even possibly going away in a very short period of time. Which, when we heard some of those rumors, that really started the alarm bells screaming, because most configuration management products are a launch daemon of some sort on the Mac right now. Chef, Puppet to a lesser extent, profiles done with Monkey, and most commercial vendor products have a daemon background agent of some sort. They are not pure MDM. And so I started out initially with a tweet to the people that follow me, just asking, hey guys, what are you doing out there right now that you can't do via pure MDM? Because I know what I'm doing internally, but I don't know what everyone else is doing. We don't really group share on a lot of that stuff. There's some projects like the Facebook CPE Chef Cookbook with their API of all their management settings, which is really cool. And but generally speaking, there's not this body of knowledge of what is everyone doing that's not native to the operating system, essentially. And a lot of responses came back. A lot of responses came back, like an eye-opening amount of responses, which then kind of prompted me to write sort of it's almost a call to arms, essentially. Even if the details that I put together in the blog post are not necessarily the hows and whys of where a big change to the operating system will come from, the direction, like what's the root cause behind it. The message that's in the blog post is really what was important and key at the end, because it reiterated, again, some of the things that we were hearing, which was essentially catalog what you're doing and let Apple know that this is not available as a native management function via, for instance, profiles or MDM. And that's really a really interesting conversation to have, because most of us right now are very, in the MacAdmin community, there's a good core of talented technical engineers and people working on their own in-house tools and solutions for making their Macs do what their business requires. And we generally don't share that back to Apple because it's a solved problem. We did it. It's done. We're managing it. We don't go, I had to write this, therefore that's a problem, and I should communicate that to Apple and let them know I couldn't do this with your OS. That's really not a common thought process, I think, for a lot of Mac admins out there, and maybe it should become one. And that's really kind of the meat at the end of the blog post, was that regardless of when or how something like this happens, it's pretty clear that Apple is attempting to unify and standardize how they do the OSs, basically. Like, they're unifying the file system. The security model, they're backporting features to macOS constantly from iOS and tvOS. We were just actually looking at some of the undocumented changes that happened to the keychain recently on Sierra. It gained keychain groups, like you can do on iOS, where you can do shared access with keychains between application groups. That is now actually on Sierra. Totally undocumented, but if you dump the keychain with a security command, you see a new access group ACL on all the items. So stuff like that. Like, basically, you can see that Apple is very definitely moving forward with sort of a unified, comprehensive security model for all their operating systems. And you don't, like Charles was saying at Mac sysadmin, do you have an AV product installed on your iPhone or iPad? And the answer is generally no. And I think you said that too, Ed.
Yeah, I mean, from a security perspective, I think it's a good move. It's too early for me to say like, yeah, I'm all for it. But
right, but
the security of iOS is probably one of the better in the business right now.
And you just reflect that same question, and whether the answer is good or bad, you ask, do you have configuration management on your iOS device? And the answer is, no, you don't. Unless
yes, we do in the form of profiles, and I understand it's not the same thing on macOS to a large degree for a number of different reasons, but we, you might not be surprised to find out.
Well, I'm sorry.
I think what he's asking, we're not running Puppet.
No, we're not running Puppet.
Right, but I would say that if it was possible to, we probably would run agents like that.
Right.
And Apple just doesn't allow it, and we've never been able to do it.
But it hasn't been.
And except in the very first days when Nigel got Puppet running on his original iPhone.
Right. But I mean, it doesn't matter really, right? Like all our security team, largely on iOS, they largely care about, did this device go missing? Can we wipe it remotely? That's like that's like one of the paramount. I'm not saying that's the only thing.
No, but the issue, we don't grant people the access to things that we would really care about losing from their iOS device.
and that's fine. But there are some other things.
Couldn't do that.
Once you have an iOS device under DEP, that I like Apple's model on this. If you're using your iOS device as a BYOD device, administrators don't get access to a personal device. They don't get a lot of access. But as soon as a device falls under DEP or is supervised, that asserts to Apple, yes, this is company property. Now you can go query it for installed applications, and you can query it for logs, and you can remotely pick up a lot of the stuff. So for us, yeah, perhaps one day we will give more information out to these devices once we're able to pull data from them. If you're using it as a BYOD and you just add your credentials to your own personal device and we can't ascertain the state of it that well, no, you're not going to get access from those devices, right? So,
right, but
sort of this weird model. I mean, I get your point.
My point is more that Apple decided that that's sufficient for iOS, and our use patterns for iOS are reflective of what we can do with it. And right now, macOS is more flexible, but we are all guests at the whim of Apple on their devices. If the next operating system has a different security model than the current operating system, we will either A, have to cope with it, or B, decide that's no longer a suitable device for us and move off of it. And
yeah, and just like I use my iOS devices for certain things and my Mac for other things, yeah, maybe the Mac will become suitable for certain things, and I will need some other OS that is suitable for these other things. I mean, it just might work like that. I don't know.
But what all this to say, basically, it was a suggestion that if you intend to try to continue to include Apple macOS devices in your environment, that you probably should start doing an assessment of what management you are doing outside of the built-in tools that Apple provides, and start letting Apple know about it.
Yeah.
Even if it's only a feature request, at least it's documented somewhere on their end that they can potentially take that into account. And that was what was suggested to us, was that you include number of devices impacted and things like that, so that they can basically take measurements essentially and factor that in. And then per continued conversations, we found out that the sky is not falling, which is good. And in the short term, agents will be fine. I can't give you any guarantees on how long that will be, but I think the advice about informing Apple more about your needs for their operating system still stands, regardless.
Yeah, and I think that's the big takeaway from your Twitter post and your blog post is that you need to be filing radars, you need to be giving feedback to Apple, let them know I'm doing these things that are important to me and I can't do them through profiles, or I can't do them really in any other way than I'm doing them, right? So I think that's the big takeaway. I mean, we've heard some other hints in this direction, but of course, they've only been hints.
Yeah.
We've seen SIP come along and sort of cordon certain pieces of the OS. It looks like Apple's going to be moving further and further in that direction, kind of like iOS, where the OS itself is completely sealed up. They've asked us once or twice about, hey, how do you image machines? Do you need to image machines?
Yeah,
they're not imaging machines.
That's the new chatter, is essentially, if anything's going to change, it'll be imaging related. But I guess we all knew that with APFS anyways. Stuff was.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, APFS announced, not really going to be ready till 2017. We don't know exactly what impact it'll have, but they're sort of laying the groundwork for all this to take place. Especially considering that they're saying that APFS is going to be the file system across everything, the watch up through the Mac, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, default file system in 2017, and HFS Plus volumes will be upgraded to APFS.
Yep.
So yeah, and that's the current thing basically, but we won't be able to prepare for that until we see more regarding APFS. So, it was funny in the conversations, you're talking to the people about the settings that they're not currently managing with a profile or with MDM. Like I can't tell you how many times I heard like, oh yeah, like screensaver, like with a profile, you can only set a certain time, but if the user wants to be more secure, they can't set it to less than that. I was like, okay, did you file a radar and let Apple know about that? Like, so they can add a minimum and a maximum. And yeah, like 1 or 2 people replied back, oh yeah, I did. But like a lot of them were like, no, that's why we use a script.
This has been an open request from us.
Yeah, I couldn't find a radar we filed for it, but we've mentioned it several times.
I think it's an Alliance ticket somewhere.
Yeah, I don't.
But yes, that is one we've asked them about.
Yeah, and
do it, and you can do it on Linux, and you can do it on Windows.
Yeah, and it's just,
this value or less is fine.
Can you do it on iOS? Can you just say maximum lock time, or?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Oh, just flip the logic. So instead of equals, you just set max. Yeah, that would.
Right, like I'll like what we want internally at least is we want to say no more than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right, and but we don't want to say 15 minutes because a lot of people I want to do it 5, or some people want it at 2 or 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine. We just want nothing greater than a certain number.
Yeah. And I think the other side to this story was that there were things that came back from us after a lot of us started. Basically, that was the other part too. Was essentially encouraging you to talk to your Apple contacts and ask. Can I get any more detail? Can I help in any way? Do you need these radars? Is this true? We got a lot of sort of response back from people after talking to their Apple SEs or whoever that essentially some of them, every one of them repeated, yes, file radars, definitely, and include the impacted number of devices. But there was also a fair number that came back that said sort of like, wow, I didn't realize you were doing that much without MDM on your devices, which just sort of goes to show the value of filing this stuff with them so that they can actually track it. If we don't tell them, they don't know.
Sure.
And we need to be, we're partners in this part. We need to be communicating with them and let them know what our needs are as far as management goes.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you watched a bunch of the videos from Mac sysadmin.
Watch some, yeah.
We're going to be discussing that in a little bit, but the end of every sysadmin, Mac sysadmin, there's a section, they get all the speakers up on stage and let the audience ask questions, and that's not recorded or streamed or anything along those lines. And yeah, a lot of the questions were sort of around this kind of topic, and people, not, I don't know about worrying, but just sort of asking the question of like, so what are we going to do in the future? Like, how do we admin these machines? And I think a lot of the speakers, including Charles, just was like, yep, see what happens, you adapt, and you continue on. Apple through certain people in the company, I guess, have said that they're not going to merge iOS and macOS, but they will definitely keep sharing these ideas between the OSs, and the more uniformity they have, certainly the easier it is for them. If they get to have one framework that works across all their platforms, then of course, they'll have to move the Mac to ARM. This is the only platform that uses x86, and it's all downhill from there. Maybe not downhill, but
Well, I guarantee you they have a ARM version of OS 10 running internally.
oh, I'm sure they do. 100% yes.
Yeah, it's called iOS.
Yeah.
Right.
In some of the latest benchmarks, I don't think we'd be too disappointed with ARM-based Macs, to be honest. It might be really nice.
Well, they'll beat these 3-year-old Macs for sure at this point.
I'm really excited. I keep going back and forth. I see Tom over here using the 12-inch, and it's really not that bad. It's really, really nice.
The M7 one is nice. I like the M7.
It's the newer one, and it's a great travel machine. That's what I took with me last week, and it's nice and light in the backpack. And I can run. You can do basic things in Logic. I needed to edit some video, and I was tempted to throw Final Cut Pro on there. I didn't get a chance to try that. I'm not saying you're going to do all the things that you do. The 15-inch, I still love it for certain things. I love having a bunch of ports available. That's really nice. But yeah, I think we're going to see ARM machines at some point. So, questions, comments? Is this scary? Is this a good future?
It's scary because I don't know what's going to happen.
Because change.
Well, no, I mean, it's not really scary, but it's annoying because we don't know. We just have these sort of hints, and maybe this, and hey, here's a really, really, really leading question I'm about to ask you, and that's sort of like, come on.
Yeah, that can definitely.
What would it mean if blah 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 hypothetical? I'm like, come on, tell us what you're doing, and don't wait until next WWDC.
Yeah. Well, we know they're on the annual release cycle, for better or for worse, but in some ways that does get us information a little bit faster sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes. And sometimes it's too fast.
Did you have the room booked until after 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone's lurking.
Well,
It's fine.
anyway, so yeah. Do you have any other follow-up, Michael?
Not really, for the most part. We've also heard that there will be, in the very short term here, potentially more APFS materials to test with. So maybe we'll get some answers to some questions sooner rather than later. But that was the comment about Apple, not really just being open. I think that's a shared frustration that a lot of us have.
Yeah. But that's nothing new either. So
No,
I mean, having been
As
working
people-
with Apple for so long, I just wish they would change. I know it's night. Yeah.
But I think the thing that that we're saying here is that we know it's difficult to work with Apple, but that shouldn't stop us. That shouldn't stop us at the point of they're not going to do anything, so I'm not going to give them feedback.
Right.
Oh, I can. So, hey, and I should have plugged this in. How about that? Battery life is so good now, I forget to plug in. Okay. Well, thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
I need to take a brief pause and see how this works. Let's see. 4 to 6. Oh, but okay, that double booked. Yeah. But it says 4 to 6.
Your calendar shows the same thing?
I don't know.
I mean,
Hey, so what I was going to do next is just do a quick wrap up of MacSysAdmin.
Nice.
For those of you who don't know, MacSysAdmin is a conference, a 4-day conference held in Gothenburg, Sweden. I've been fortunate enough to be able to speak at the last, I don't know, 5 or so. And it's a conference. You know what it is. It's people getting up on stage and talking. But it's an entirely different audience, which makes it a bit of a unique event. So MacSysAdmin.se is the website, and all the videos are available from it now, which is pretty cool. I spoke a little bit about security. Rich Troughton spoke on APFS. I can't remember all of the talks. Charles Gage. There were a bunch of good talks. The person who runs MacSysAdmin, Tico, and I'm not going to pronounce his last name because it's Swedish and I will mispronounce it. He's been a little sick lately, dealing with some cancer-related illness. And last year, I didn't realize, I don't think, how it affected me last year that he announced prior to the conference that he might not make the conference, et cetera, et cetera. He did make it, but didn't attend the evening events. This year he looked great. It was nice to see him, and I didn't realize how much of a more positive spin that was going to put on everything, but it was nice to see him back and in good spirits and good health. So it's a 4-day conference. I encourage people to go if they can make it. It's a bit of a journey. A lot of the speakers are from the U.S., but most of the audience is much more local, from Norway, Sweden, that region. So it definitely gives you a different viewpoint into things. I forget if 2 years ago someone was speaking about DEP and rolling things out with the volume purchase program, and someone immediately piped up and said, "We don't have VPP here." You go, "Oh, yeah, you have a whole different set of challenges." So Europe is kind of a funny thing to watch sometimes. We know because we've seen challenges with ordering Macs across all our offices, and you have to order different machines in Europe than you do in the US, and they're different SKUs. So it's nice to be in touch with that crowd and sort of watch some of the differences and things that they go through. So, yep, like I said, all the videos online, good. And speaking of conferences, now I can get into the mindset of MacTech, which is coming up November 16th through 18th. Yeah, now I can get my head around that and dig into that. Can't think of other events much past that for the Mac community.
MacAduck again.
MacAduck again, and that's 2017, but they did announce it.
Yeah.
Are you speaking? Nice. Do you know what you're speaking about, or did they just ask you?
No, it's an updated version of the talk I gave. MacTech.
Oh yeah, good. I want to go to that.
Building your own custom stuff for your own custom life management tools.
Nice.
Which is becoming, as we just discussed, is becoming less and less important.
Maybe not. At least not in the very short term, right? We're still going to need to do this for a certain period of time.
Yeah, no, I mean totally. And then in one of my things, last year when I talked about a MacTech, I mean, we did all this work, and that was just before SIP came out, and SIP alleviated a chunk of the problems, but not everything. So.
Yeah, I would want to get to MacAduck. Both years they've had it on the weekend of my wife's birthday, so.
Birthday in London.
I suggested that, but the fact that I would be away a day or two, kind of crushes that. And I don't think Matt has announced the dates for Mac DevOps in Vancouver yet, but that's when I'm going to target getting to. I'm going to try to make that one. This will be his 3rd year, and he's moved it up from a 1-day event to a 2-day event, and 2017 we'll see.
Yeah, it was good. That's always been a good conference.
Yeah,
I've been to both.
I've been to neither. Because last year, I guess, or no, earlier this year, it was a week ahead of Penn State, so that was a bit of a conflict. But I did have a nice discussion with Matt. He said, "Hey, us conference organizers like talking to each other. And if you have dates in mind, yeah, just bring them up." So if he had that a month ahead, yeah, maybe I would have been able to make it. I think those were the big topics. Anybody struggling with anything? No, nothing. Everything's perfect in your world.
Boring stuff.
Boring stuff.
Sierra VPN. Keeping old hacks working.
What are you using for VPN?
We have always on VPN for education. Funky New Jersey law.
So, are you using OS X server as the VPN backend or something else?
No.
That's no.
And everything broke, so. But it's going away. Everything's. It's nice, like we were talking about earlier, with iOS, as things were introduced, they were new. Now with macOS, everything's being put on after the fact, and we're having to rip off a lot of old Band-Aids. So, but they're usually, SIP was a long time coming.
Yeah. What are you using for VPN?
I'm not on that team, so I watch from the sidelines.
But you have to roll out the client.
Oh yes,
Right.
I push the buttons they tell me to push and funnel the complaints back to them.
So iOS has an always-on VPN
It does.
capability. Are you using that on the Mac?
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's
That's
not
what
the same.
was gonna ask. I wasn't
And-
sure if there was some client that did it. Like there are some third-party VPNs that.
Yeah, and a lot of that broke, old PPTP stuff, and
What was Sierra?
but it's gone,
Gone.
thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully, because it was a false sense of security in a lot of ways.
But that's just gone from the native VPN.
Right. So if you're rolling your own solution.
Oh yes,
and-
yeah. Third party can
Yeah.
still support it if they want, but that's yuck. And I didn't dig into it, but are the libraries that supported PPTP still there? Like, could you just do this from the command line? I haven't looked. I never really thought about it because I don't care. I'd rather just use L2TP and be done
I
with it.
haven't looked at what it's linked against, but Apple really did go to a great extent to rip out a lot of older protocol support. Like rip it. It's like gone.
Yeah.
I think the only reason that the one that's used in, they ripped it out of Safari support, but it's still there because it's used in older Active Directory environments, but it gives you a warning now that beyond Sierra, if you're not doing AES 128 at a minimum, that
Samba stuff?
it just Active Directory communications in general.
Oh,
There's an encryption protocol you can use for talking to your domain controller, and there's an older protocol, it's like MD4 hashed or something like that. I can't remember what it is. That they ripped it out of the TLS support in Safari. It's gone for HTTPS and everything.
oh yeah.
They left it because it's still needed for old Active Directory. So it's still in the operating system, but not for much longer.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. That seemed to be a topic from a number of people at MacSysAdmin, people talking about Active Directory. And Joel Rennick gave a talk on an open source tool he's written called Nomad, which stands for No More AD Directory, and it sort of lets machines.
I'm actually helping out on that project.
Yeah. Well, I saw that presentation. I thought, wow, I'm glad I don't deal with that.
Yeah, I just helped them write an implementation for doing LDAP ping. So instead of improperly scanning through DNS for the domain controllers and trying to guess what site you're part of based on the subnet of your machine, it actually implements it the way Windows does and just asks the domain controller, hey, what site am I part of?
Yep.
And so, yeah, no, very cool project. Highly recommend it. That was actually the first Swift code I ever wrote. So
Nice. Yeah. The last day of the conference, Greg Nagel and I gave a talk on command line tools that admins should be familiar with. But one of the things that I dove into quite a bit was logging, so the new log stuff. And I think that's really interesting with Sierra. Like, it's in some ways it seems totally broken, but it isn't. I think it's just a big shift in the way that it works. But I got to poke Joel and some of the Apple people about that, because if you want to use the new logging stuff from Swift, you know how you do it? You write it in Objective-C.
Oh.
That's how it works. Swift support coming soon.
yeah, it's a bunch of Objective-C macros, basically.
Yeah.
It's like OS_log, but
Yep.
then behind the scenes, it turns into like a different function altogether. It's really annoying. Because I'm over here like writing like PyObjective-C, which makes it even harder.
Yeah.
And you can't link against any of the functions that they document because they don't actually exist. They're all magicked away by macros into something completely different.
I have a solution for you.
Yeah, I know. I'm writing by Objective-C.
Yeah, you could just write Objective-C. So in the Slack channel, off-topic discussion, curious to hear what the Hive Mind thinks. What are some of the password complexity requirements that you guys use? You know, I don't remember. I assume we have some complexity requirements. I haven't looked in a very long time.
2FA, that's the complexity requirement.
Yeah, I think that's it. We rely very heavily on our two-factor authentication. I presume we have something with our passwords, but yeah, I haven't looked because I haven't changed my password in quite some time. So it hasn't forced me to do anything. You know, I tend to kind of throw letters and numbers and symbols at my password anyway. And I think that's the frustrating thing on external, you know, websites. I'm signing up for something and you create an account and you put in a password and it says, nope, you can't use these special symbols. And you go, you're doing it really wrong.
Sorry, we have an 8-character limit.
Yeah. You
The
see
upper bound? What?
you see all these frustrating things with
Or
passwords.
you can't
Like,
paste
hunter
into
to
the
it
password.
is.
Right.
What's that?
Or you can't paste into the password field.
Or
Yeah,
That's
that's
your
really-
password agent can't even paste into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You have to have the accessibility framework type it for you.
So the follow-up question is, but what about local accounts on the device? We use two-factor authentication on everything where possible. So that password would sync from our directory service, so it would end up following the same password complexity. We generally frown on people just adding local accounts.
No, but we don't require two-factor to log into your Mac.
We don't require two-factor to log into your Mac.
It's the same, whatever the password requirement is that none of us can remember. It's
Right.
the same, but we don't rely on two-factor.
Although Sierra now has
Yep.
really nice support for that.
Yeah, they brought back the PIV smart card support.
Yeah.
YubiKey has something you can use sort of like out of the box, which is nice. It's nice, but from what I haven't tried it, but from what I've read, it's still like the YubiKey solution requires a user agent. So there's a bunch of stuff still running in user land that I don't know. I haven't really sort of like sussed it out, but I mean, it helps, but I would like to see that integration a little bit deeper, I think.
You still have firewall too. Complexities.
Yeah, that would be great if you could use two-factor authentication against pre-boot in FE.
And I don't remember anything about our complexity requirements other than I have a vague recollection that it's not a list of must have this, must be longer than this. It's more of a we run all of the passwords you try through does this password seem strong enough kind of heuristic, and it's very open and kind of yeah, I'm sure there are rules underneath the hood. It's code, but I don't think it's not a list of like must have characters, must have uppercase, because if you have a huge long string of lowercase characters, that's fantastic. Right?
Yeah.
Enough entropy, you're great. So.
Oh, yeah. One more reminder from the Slack channel, speaking of upcoming events. The one I always forget because I don't deal with Casper is Jamf Nation. And I guess.
What's a Jamf Nation?
Yeah, so that's their conference next week. Looking forward to Jamf Nation user conference next week. And one of their sessions about managing Macs in an open world where everyone is an admin. Yeah, to tie all that back in, that's actually one of the things, I think for a long time, everyone says, oh, you shouldn't run as admin, you shouldn't run as admin. And maybe you can get away with that on your personal machine, but across a big fleet and in your company, it's really difficult to get away from. I think some of these moves that Apple's making that we're talking about towards securing the device, it gets less and less important if you're an admin on the machine or not. Like the machine sort of gets protected against that, and people doing dumb things as admin.
Yeah, and I think I even covered that a little bit in my blog post, essentially, as the security model increases, essentially, at some point, what does admin even mean anymore when all you can mess with is user space stuff?
Right. Like that's the equivalent to iOS, right? Like you're an admin on your iOS device, right? Kind of.
Basically.
So, okay. Anybody else struggling? Questions? Sierra, is it getting rolled out?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yep.
No blockers?
No. This was the smoothest, literally nothing broke.
We had a few things, but they were
Crusty stuff.
They were our things,
Yeah,
and had
our
to be
things.
fixed. So, okay.
Yeah, I think the only real issues we had were there was a bug in Go where older Go binaries compiled before a certain version just didn't work. So that was easy enough, just recompiled things. That was a pretty. Apparently, the Go was writing their own syscalls in a few places, which was kind of strange. Who knows?
Okay. If there are no questions and no comments, then thank you very much. And thank you, Michael, for joining us and hanging out for the chat afterwards.
Yeah, very definitely.
Right on.
Catch you guys later.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you.